JLF's Brave New World welcomes you back to our second session of the day. Those of you who missed our earlier session, Writing About Writing, Andrew Sean Greer in conversation with B. Rowlatt, and all of the other sessions featuring people like John Ralston Saul, Toby Walsh, Lakshmi Puri, Krishna Ramanujan, Yermo Rodriguez, Megha Majumdar, and so many others. You can catch these on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest, or on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF. Our official radio partner is Red FM, Bajate Raho. Our next session today is The Battles Within, addressing mental health. Anna Chandy and Shelja Sen in conversation. Anxiety and stress are the order of the day. Transactional analyst and counselor Anna Chandy and Shelja Sen, narrative therapist and author, speak of strategies of coping at a time when the pressures of the lockdown affect children and parents, as also the lonely and the isolated. Anna Chandy has been deeply involved in the mental health domain in India for more than 25 years. She is the founder of Anna Chandy and Associates. Chandy has pioneered change in the counseling profession in India, advocating international standards of practice and an ethical and relational approach to counseling. She also serves as chairperson of the board of trustees of the Live, Love, Laugh Foundation, which I love, a charitable trust which was founded in 2015 by actor Deepika Padukone to give hope to every individual experiencing stress, anxiety, and depression. Chandy is a columnist and author, and her first book, Battles in the Mind, Conquering and Winning Over Emotional Pain, was published in 2017. Dr. Shelja Sen is a narrative therapist, a writer, and co founder of Children First Institute of Child and Adolescent Mental Health. And in her third book, Reclaim Your Life, she has shared her own experiences with depression and curated stories of skills and know how of the young people she works with. She's a TED speaker and a columnist with Indian Express. Please do comment and ask questions by typing it in the comment section. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest GLF. Ladies and gentlemen, the battles within, addressing mental health. Shelja Sen and Anna Chandy in conversation. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Thank you, GLF, for arranging this talk. Like Sanjoy said, there's so much of talk of mental health nowadays, but there's still a long way to go for us. There's silence, there's shame, there's stigma, and somewhere we expect the young people, the people struggling with mental health, to be their own advocates. And that can become a very, very difficult battle for them, especially when they have labels and tags of being weak, being damaged, or in some way they are dismissed or defined by the struggles they are going through. So thank you so much, Shanjoy and JLF, for arranging this talk on something so important. Mental health is not an individual problem. It's a collective responsibility. And with that, I would like to invite Anna. Anna, I would like to start and I would like to ask you this question. There's a lot of talk of mental health. Can I request you to first address your perspectives, your views on mental health, and also look at the larger socio-cultural context when we're talking about mental health? Thank you.
First, let me say it's an honor to be here at the JLF session, and I really look forward to being in conversation with you, Shelja, because I've watched your YouTube some time back, and I was very impressed and impacted with wow. And so it was really a pleasure that I thought here is somebody we have some commonalities. So I think mental health is now a term that is more obviously used now in our country, especially the last 5 years. But I think people have not really understood the meaning of mental health, because when they talk about mental health, they talk only about mental illness. And I think that's just an aspect of mental health, or a branch. So I think we need to look at mental health. And to me, mental health has three components. That is when you are able to be socially adequate, you have the capacity to contain and solve problems day to day, and also that you feel that you've actually, as an adult, you've reached the milestones of both mind and well-being, so and emotional well-being. So I think we need to first understand that. Today, I think people are more, they kind of talk about it, but in my view, they need to understand it more before they actually talk about it loosely, because they associate mental health with certain segments of society, especially in India, forgetting that mental health is for everybody. It's really not only an issue or an illness. Mental illness is not an issue with certain segments of society. And I think that's what I would really like to bring to the awareness, especially in our Asian context. I wouldn't even say Indian context, I would say Asian context. Coming to the second part, for me, mental health uh, is also connected to a lot of the social issues in our country. Because while we are looking at the social issues from an adult lens, I think these are deeper systemic issues, which is really a collective responsibility of how we, as a nation, take care of our young. Um,
Thank you so much, Anna. I think what you said, deeper systemic issues and how, as a nation, we are taking care of our young, and I think that's something very, very close to my heart. Also, I just like to, when we talk about mental health, there's a problem I have with the word epidemic that is used a lot. You know that mental health has reached epidemic proportions, unprecedented proportions, as if mental health is an illness, it's a disease. And the problem with that is that it locates the problem in the individual, that there's a problem with the person, there's something wrong with the person, but actually it's not the person, it's a social cultural context that we need to shift the lens towards that rather than the individual. And this whole talk about, again, I've become very provocative here, but it's okay, that I also disagree with this chemical imbalance, because what is this chemical imbalance? No substantial research has indicated anything like that. And if somebody has a chemically balanced brain, what does it look like? So I have a problem with that. I think it's so important for us to locate the problem in the larger social cultural context and understand the nuances of it. In narrative therapy, we have a quote, uh, the person is not the problem is the problem, and the problem is social. And that's so important for us because I work with children and young people, and children and young people at very early age, we start recruiting them into believing there's one kind of success. There's a ladder of success we make for them, and we expect there's one right way of living. And if they do not follow those rungs of success or those milestones of success, we think there's something wrong with them. And children have themselves internalized this ladder of success. They think if they're not able to attain that, most of the young people I work with, it's because they have this struggling with this idea of success, and they feel they're not able to meet those standards set by the society. And so it's important that it's not our young people, our kids, that who are broken, it's our society. And sometimes when it seems like we have inflicted third degree burns on them, and when they react, then we just look at the behavior, the alcohol problems, the drugs, or their aggression, or their violence, or cutting. We say, oh, children nowadays, young people nowadays, not realizing that what is the larger, the social cultural context I always want to look at. The other thing that I would like to highlight here, and I think, I don't know what you think about, is that as a narrative therapist, I believe that people are multi-storied, and stories shape our identity. And our identities are formed on the intersection of so many things like our gender, our class, the caste. And at this time, I think it becomes really, really important for us to look at children and young people. See, I talk about children, young people more than adults, who are hidden from us, like the street children. Like there are 18 million street children in the country. I mean, that's almost as much as the population of Delhi. Who's taking care of them? What about their mental health difficulties? What about who's dying there? Who's dying of starvation? Who's dying of suicide there? And I heard Arundhati Roy once talk about that COVID-19 is X-ray of our times. And I kind of agreed with that. X-ray of our times, showing us fault lines and exposing that what is wrong with our society. And it's so important that we having this. And I'm so glad that mental health is being talked about, because this is so important, right? And talking about children, and I know your particular interest in early childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences. I would like to understand your perspective on the role it plays in mental health.
Um, I think that's the space that I really work in. I work with adults, but really probing and exploring early childhood experiences and how it's actually created the original blueprint or the original narrative, which of course keeps getting shaped and emerges as we go along into adulthood. For me, I think there are two or three areas, Shelja, that I particularly look for, having been impacted myself. The areas that I look at and have particular interest is child sexual abuse, because I'm a survivor. I also look at family systems in terms of how our families actually encouraging and implying encouragement by perpetuating these, because these secrets are kept under the wraps, because family honor becomes the focus, and families therefore kind of become inward looking. And another area that I'm very, very interested in looking at is, it's very interesting for me because I read a lot. People talk about gaslighting. Okay? Actually, to me, the earliest wound of gaslighting is by adults to children. When a child comes and tells you that something has happened, most often the adult caregivers, they gaslight and say, especially if it's some form of violation in any form, they say, no, you're imagining, that didn't happen. And a little child gets really confused. And for me, I think these issues are very, very large and very important. And now when we're talking currently about COVID and the pandemic, there's been a lot of data and a lot of evidence talking about domestic violence. Okay, again, that's a gender issue, and domestic violence didn't start just because of lockdown. These were issues that were existing in our systems and because of the lockdown and because of this crisis and disruption that we're going through, they've just become so obvious that we have to account for it. Before, a lot of societal issues, we were kind of discounting it and not accounting for it. So I think these are all obvious things. As you said, and I completely agree with you, that while we can look at mental health issues, unless we look at these early childhood issues and how are we adults really taking care of our young, are we really taking care, or are they growing up in neglect? Neglect is not because they're physically neglected because of food, water, and shelters. I think psychological factors are so important. So when we look at even between, say, people of different strata and different classes, I think it's important to address all these things. Unfortunately, we haven't, and I think the time has come. All of us just keep talking, talking about these issues, and I don't think we're really focusing and looking at these deeper psychological issues. And I think the time has come that we need to address these issues. So, all over the world, whichever psychologists you talk about, whether you talk to child psychologists, you talk to adult psychologists, everybody, universally, you know it, we all look at the first 7 years of a person's life and the impact. So, my question really is that is it not time that we as adults and we as civil society start really focusing on our young? Because our young become our youth. India is a young nation. The average age of an Indian is 31.9 years. And if people suffer from severe mental illness issues, they actually strike in our productive years. So I think we need to look at this as a whole, and we cannot look at issues in isolation. The issues are connected to the system.
So true. Thank you so much, Anna. I totally resonate with what you said. And, when you were talking about the secrets that the children have to carry, or the burden that of secrets in the family, and the child sexual abuse, or the family honor, and the gaslighting, it reminded me of the 3 Ds I talk about, especially in mental health. The 3 Ds is, one is dismissal.
Yes.
That it's like, you're just overreacting, or you're being a drama queen,
Yeah.
or why don't you snap out of it, or what children have to go through, the dismissive, when they share that it's okay, we won't talk about it, or maybe you imagined it, I don't think he meant it like that, he's your uncle, he really means well for you. So that the one is, of course, the dismissal, and the other one is dumping. Dumping is when we, everything the person, like this young girl I was talking to, and she said, every choice I make, what clothes I wear, what I want to do, everything is framed as, oh, because of your depression. So all, it becomes a kind of a thing, everything is being, every decision she's making is about depression. And the third D I talk about is defining. When the person's only story becomes of depression, that these, and I think there somewhere, I would say the culprits are the mental health professionals, when sometimes the psychiatry and the psychologist, therapist start seeing the person as, oh, this person is depressed, or diagnosis depressed, the case is depressed. And I think somewhere we need to move away from that, the way we are dumping or dismissing or defining children like that. Because, if we look at the larger society, what do we really want these children to do? Um, what is a core issue, if I was to say? The core issues I see, Anna, is that one is that they're robbed of their sense of agency, because
Yeah.
we're controlling them all the time. They're robbed of their sense of purpose or meaning, that what do they want to do? And the third is the sense of disconnection, where they don't have a sense of personally safe spaces or emotionally safe spaces. And these 3 things, agency, meaning, and disconnect or connection, that young people, or any human being, actually, for human beings, these are 3 very important things. Because agency is when it's defined for them, it's told to them, this is success, and this is what you're going to do in school, this is what you're going to do in college, this is what you're going to do. And their normative judgments on how they have to live their life, or they have the sense of connection. Right now in the lockdown, what is the biggest issue that young people are facing? They might be on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook, wherever, but the sense of disconnection that they feel, because the children, for them, their spaces, like their rides to schools, talking to teachers, talking to counselors, playing football, whatever, those spaces have been taken away from them. So that is one of the, that's why mental health become such a big thing right now, because the agency, they can't choose what they want to do, they have no sense of meaning, and they have a sense of disconnection. So, in this sense, like you talked about how you liked my wow, which is
Yeah.
basically, you are worthy, you're original, you're welcome, no matter what. I think, again, I also, the other thing I really feel, many times young people whose friends might be going through mental health difficulties, or parents whose children might be going through difficulties, they ask, what do we do, what can we do? And actually, it's not so much of a rocket science. They don't have to study or do. I mean, it's great if they do read and become more aware. But actually, end of the day, it comes to that every person needs to be seen. The I see you.
Yeah.
That I love that movie. In that movie, Avatar, the way
Yeah.
Navis greeted each other with "I see you," where like this young person was telling me that when somebody sees me, I feel they think that I'm worthy of their attention and interest.
Yeah.
And in this present day, when there's an attention economy, or I would say attention economy that we live in, where we don't have much attention to give to a lot of things, it becomes a challenge. The I see you, where do children get that I see you, I hear you, you're worthy of my attention and time? That's one thing. The other thing is for young people, uh, asking them rather than telling them. We're telling them we want to fix them. Let's fix the problem, because somewhere there's like a machine that's broken, and go to a therapist and fix them. Asking them sometimes, tell me how I can help you. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to be? Sometimes as simple as that. If you're willing to listen to them without any judgment, without dismissing them or gaslighting, like you said, they'll tell you exactly what they want you to do. And they're very aware nowadays. Young people are very aware. They're more activist in this area than anything else. And third thing that children need to hear from us is, I have your back. No matter what happens, I accept you as you are. I love you the way you are. You are unique, you're different. I won't judge you by your background, or what marks you get, or how you look, or that fair and lovely look that the whole world or society is demanding from you. I love you the way you are. And if this is a message a young person gets, that's sometimes that's all we need. They have an agency, they have a sense of purpose, they have a sense of meaning. That makes a lot of difference. And I think one more thing that I would like to add here, and I'm seeing this, and I would like your views on this. um, I'm seeing more and more uh, young people talking about two things actually. One is how they crave to be in nature. That's been taken. We living in concrete jungles and artificial worlds, and the screen is making it even more artificial. And what I'm sensing from them is, I wish I could just go into the forest, I could go into the mountains, or sit next to a river. And how healing that is. That's one thing I'm hearing from young. The other thing that I'm hearing from young people is how important it is for them to contribute in some way, to reach out to each other, to acts of kindness, in some way making a difference. And I think that I'm seeing in more and more young people, when we kind of break down in what way would they like to move forward. They're not saying, I'm going to make a lot of money. Most of them are saying, I want to do something that contributes, because somewhere they're also realizing with this whole thing of climate change, or what's happening around the Black Lives Matter, or what's happening in our country, that you know this our capitalist society has led to the problem that our world is facing, and they are sensing it. They want to move away, and somewhere we have to support them in this journey of theirs. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before.
So I think I see two or three observations that I've had. Is one is that we need to encourage children to share. And when
Mhm.
I speak about sharing whatever feelings they're experiencing, there's no right feeling and wrong feeling. If I'm angry, I'm angry. If I'm sad, I'm sad. Very often parents don't encourage that, and especially I see that very often, and they discourage it, not because the child doesn't know how to share, because parents are uncomfortable to actually hear these feelings, so they actually try and discourage them. The other thing is, Shelja, for me, the power of listening. I always tell adults, can you listen? Can you pay attention? You don't have to solve their problem. You need to pay attention. You need to be fully present to whatever they are sharing, because you need to encourage children to communicate. And communication is not just through talking. There are multiple forms of communication, and we need to actually, update ourselves to their form of communication. And the most important for me, Shelja, which I think is really missing, is actually, as adults, I think it's important for us to value children and give them a sense of respect and dignity.
Sure.
Okay, respect is not just meant for elders.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
this is respect is not connected to age. We confuse it with age. I think all human beings, whether they're young, middle-aged, or old, we need to be respectful of them and give them a sense of dignity and self-worth, because that is what is going to take them, where they need to go. And all of us are unique, and encourage them to embrace their uniqueness. We're all unique. Even siblings are unique. That's the reality of the matter. So I think that's very important. With regard to screen time and screen time or what's happening now, I'm one of the people, an older advocate, where I really don't believe in this so-called 24 hours of structured time. I think it's okay for children to have time that's not structured, because that's when creativity increases. They may get bored, but out of that boredom, they will create activities and forms of play or something that interests them. So it's okay for everybody not to be have this kind of packed, structured day. And the other thing that I don't know if you've noticed, I am very concerned of the kind of helicoptering that is taking place in this over monitoring. Okay, for example, I'm really surprised. While we are the long term need or the objective is to protect children, but if you're going to have these various monitors that are going to signal to the parent every movement of this child, whether this child is at home or this child is at school, what you're actually doing is you're just creating hyper vigilance. And the child and the parents are going to always live in this activated, threatened, triggered state, never relaxing, and therefore you're actually causing agitation. Because if you're going to be in that state, what you are doing is you're coming in the way of children and understanding and observing and being mindful of their own body sensations, which actually indicate to them what their body is talking to them about. For example, I know when I'm nervous, I feel the churn in my stomach. Somebody else feels their heart rate. These are actually our body talking to us. And if we're going to have these multiple monitors and multiple technology to kind of take over all our own faculty and functioning, then, as you said, we lose human connectedness because we become robotic.
True.
For example, um, what difference would we be if we are going to be so robotic?
Mhm.
So that essential human connection is so important, and I think we should not lose that, or we shouldn't minimize that in any way. And so therefore, as you said, I think it's time that we start looking at all these things. And I always tell people, listen to children. You don't have Listening doesn't mean obeying, but pay attention, be mindful of what they're saying, whatever it may be.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. I'm just going to move the conversation a little forward to talking about mental health during COVID times. I think, again, I would like to highlight here that there's a different reality. Let's address the privilege and power here. That the different reality for each and every family. The way the COVID is impacting families, it depends on the income level of the family, where they are located, which region of the country, what's the family like? Is it a multi generational joint family? Is it single mother family? Or what's the age of the child? What is the age of both the children? Is it like young people, children? And the profile is a child with disability. So many things that we need to be aware of when we talk about mental health and COVID, and how it is, how people are navigating their life through these difficult, very intense times, I would say. I met this young girl, 12-year-old, and she told me that, for me, COVID is like polluted air. And that's stuck with me, because she said, it's like polluted air because it's there everywhere. all around. It's getting affected. Everybody's getting affected by it, and we don't even realize. We do our school, my parents work, and I realize it's so true, because if you think about it, we're trying to carry on with the lives the way we can. We are working, so a working mother has to deal with taking care of her family, her work, her children, household chores, everything. All our roles and identities have got collapsed in these small spaces. And sometimes we forget that children also get impacted by this, because they're like sponges, they are soaking in. And many times parents might complain that this child is very reactive, getting angry, but that's just the behavior. What is really impacting the child is because everybody's getting impacted. Like sometimes children go through a triple jeopardy, in terms of they themselves can't label what they're going through because they're children, they can't label their experiences. Secondly, parents themselves are going through very difficult times. Thirdly, at present, all this, like I said, all the spaces that they had, like their schools and friends and aunts and uncles, their homes they could go to, have been taken away from them. They've robbed of all these spaces. So it's like a triple jeopardy they face. And children, young people, each reacts in a different way, because young people, they might react by shutting themselves up in a room and not wanting to interact with anybody, and that's okay too, because they're not used to that face to face time. Now suddenly you can't expect them to be sitting and interacting with everybody. Or children, younger children are crying, throwing tantrums, or so all these things, the way COVID is impacting. And I think I would like to say that, this, that I like to believe that each and every child is wired and inspired differently. And in that sense, I think parents are also, when I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about families. In no way am I criticizing families or parents, because I think the parents are going through very, very intense times. They're doing the best they can in the circumstances that we are, the very intense times that we are going through. So I think this is important for us to keep in mind, that for parents right now, they have to be a teacher as well as take care of the cooking, the household chores, their work. So it's a huge struggle for them. And I I don't know what kind of experiences you are having during these times. I wonder.
So I think I would start by saying when there's times of uncertainty, uncertainty is always there associated with grief. Whether it's parents or adults, universally there is some grief. All of us are grieving some loss. There was a life pre-COVID and there's a life COVID. So there is some grief. Some of the grief is very obvious. Some may not be so obvious. So in a way, or each of us, or whether it's adults or children, each of us is in some stage of going through some stage of grief. And as you are aware, any one of the 5 stages of grief. That's the first part. So I think it's very important for me to account for that reality that there is grief. The second thing I think is that what we are all struggling with is when there's uncertainty, there's a lack of predictability. And predictability, whether it's for adults or children, is a existential need. We need that predictability because it seemingly makes us feel somewhere in control. That may not be the absolute reality, but we feel that we need that predictability. And the third thing is the spaces, what we call now, we could call it blended spaces or gray spaces, because most of us are working from home. What was done, there is a kind of merging and there's a gray area, and therefore everybody's struggling. I think for parents, I actually think there are a few things that parents need to know, which unless they do, they will not be able to be supportive and be available for their children. And there are 3 terms, and this was actually very beautifully done by a psychologist called uh, Carla Naumberg, which I thought was she calls it the first step is proteins. Parents need 3 things. Step 1 is what she calls terms as protein. Protein are all the professionals in the parents' lives that are whether it's your mental health professionals, pediatricians, your personal doctors, the professionals who you engage with. These, you may need some protein once in a while. The second one that she actually calls is the crew. Parents need the crew. And the crew is actually your RW, whether it's a residence welfare association members, or your children's football clubs, or whatever the various children's activities. These are people in your life that you have some commonalities, but they're not the besties. But you do have some shared commonalities, therefore there is some support with each other. And the third, what she says is, she says the peeps in your life. And the peeps in your life are those where you have intimate relationships with close friends, where you can actually share your vulnerabilities, your frustrations. Now, she says these are three branches of support that parents do need, especially during these trying times, because different groups give different support. And the reason she says that is, unless we do this, what happens to us is we are ourselves in a triggered state. All our buttons are already flashing green and orange. And therefore, when we are in that heightened state, our children will we will press these buttons knowingly or unknowingly. And then our responses are very reactive, and which actually can cause long-term harm. And so I think it's important for all parents and all caregivers, especially when we have little children or toddlers, because they can't even understand what's really happening. The older children, we can give them some information, age appropriate information. I think we need to actually look at these things. I think that's very, very important. The other thing, Shelja, which I think is very important, is children do have a capacity to understand. And therefore, it is trying times for all of us. We need to give them age appropriate information that they can make meaning about and with. And I think it's important, and it's okay to have these, what I term, uncomfortable conversations. That is, it's difficult for all of us. For example, if there's a family that's going through financial difficulties now, the parents will not be able to provide everything that the child needs. And age appropriately, you need to be able to share that. And children do understand. I do think, again, that's what I said. I don't think we should minimize their capacity to understand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. I think we'll have to move on to question and answers now from the audience. Thank you. I love that protein and crew and peeps. Very interesting indeed. So I'll direct the first question to you, Anna. The question is, given the variety of causes of mental health issues, childhood abuse, social isolation, or disadvantage, which may take long to eradicate, how can we encourage people affected to speak more openly before it is too late?
I think we need to work with the stigma, and working with the stigma is actually encourage in my practice. I encourage my clients to say they are in therapy. They don't have to say the narrative or the issue about therapy, but they can talk that they're in therapy. I can tell you openly, I've been a therapist for 27 years. I still take therapy every Monday. Mm-hmm. And as all of you are aware, I came from a dysfunctional marriage. I am a survivor, and therefore it took a lot of work for me to personally and psychologically to reach where I am. So I think that's the first step. The second step is, I think, awareness building and sensitivity. The commonness that you see between COVID and mental illness, it cuts all barriers.
Yes, yes.
It's not to any particular segment.
Sure, sure. I think that that metaphor that's talked about, that we might not be in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm.
Yes,
in the same boat for sure, but we are in the same storm. The next question is, one deals with the lack of personal space through lockdown. While lockdown has allowed us a chance to reconnect with family in many cases, but it has also totally shut down all forms of external contact and almost left us feeling like we're living in a box. So I'll take this question and I'll move the next question to you. So Nilanjana, I think that's a very important point you brought up, that yes, like I was saying earlier, that what COVID has done is it's collapsed our identities, our roles into small spaces at homes where we are juggling so many roles. And it's not easy for us. It's not easy. And I think, especially for families, when they have young adults, it's difficult because young adults need their space, they need their, they have found their own ways of maintaining the distance by locking themselves in the room or making sure they're up during the night and sleep during the day. So different ways. But I would say that, what the way I understand, the most important thing parents need to do is take care of themselves, because, like, those safety instructions we get, when we take a flight, that in case of lack of oxygen, first take oxygen before giving to your children. Like Anna so beautifully said, if all our buttons are flashing, then we are going to be in a reactive state all the time. So make sure, as parents, you're taking care of yourselves. You are making sure that your green bulbs are showing, not flashing reds all the time. And yes, if you're taking care of yourself, it's through meditation, it's through yoga, it's through uh, fun times, Netflix, anything you're doing, small things, that your five joy diet, I call, through the day, small little things that you're giving yourself joy. You take care of yourself. Keep your eyes and hearts open for children, because children sometimes they show it in their behavior. Find time for them, listen to them. Just that time, just to be hang around, have fun, be playful. I use the term PQ, playfulness quotient. So make sure you're playful, you be silly, have fun with them. Most importantly, drop that rope, that tug of war that happens in the family. This is not the time for them to be learning lessons, big lessons, and just drop that and be accepting. It's very, very difficult time, very intense times. You need empathy, you need compassion, they need your compassion. Another metaphor that I used is our relationship with our children is like a bank account. We're making deposits in it, but we're making withdrawals also. And the memory of this pandemic are going to stay with our children forever. So it's very important that we be mindful what deposits are we making and what withdrawals we are doing right now. Anna, the next question I'm directing to you, taking a toll on our mental health. COVID is taking a toll on our mental health. How can we stay positive when everything around us is either dying or is suffering?
So one is, as I said, I call it the ABC. First, you need to account for your reality, whatever it may be. The second thing is B, which is body and breath. My being mindful of your breath actually helps your mind calm down. And the third is communicate. Communicate is not just listening, it's about sharing and expressing what we feel. What happens when we communicate, if you want to know it from a medical perspective, when we communicate and we share, we actually feel empathized with another person. And what happens when there's empathy is that we empathy builds human connectedness, and when human connectedness is built, there is oxytocin, which is a hormone that is released, and oxytocin actually is very soothing for us, and that's what we need to do. And that is why I am now an advocate that during this time, even people in leadership, whether you're with a leader at home or you're a leader in an organization, the biggest, most important competence that all of us human beings need to develop is empathy to build human connectedness.
That next question is from Punita. Juvenile offenders through the sorry, if we look at juvenile offenders through the lens of their socio-cultural context, the lack of respect and dignity they have faced through their lives, are they not more victims of their circumstances requiring compassion rather than retribution? I think, Punita, personally, this is something that I would like to address. Punita, what you have said is so true. This is, that, like when I was talking about, they, we have inflicted the third degree burns on our youth, especially young people who come from circumstances where they are, they sometimes they are surviving, and there's sometimes the way they survive is seen as criminal, and that's their survival, and then they're put into these homes and they are seen as juvenile offenders. And we know now, I think this is a question across the globe, that the legal system, the way it has existed till now, or the police system the way it has existed till now, is not working, because this is no sense of justice there. By the police brutality we're talking about, by putting people in prisons, or the present legal system actually doesn't work. What we need is restorative justice, and I strongly believe in restorative justice, because there's an offense, there has been there has harm been done, there has been a wrongdoing, a person who has been harmed, a person who has harmed, and also a community that has been impacted. So, restorative justice is about bringing healing to everybody. And we know there's so much of research, and there's something very close to my heart, because I'm trying to do more and more work of restorative justice in schools. And also, with a lot of young people that I met after the follow up of Me Too, where they were thrown out of schools or colleges, but that was not um, solution to any problem at all. I mean, we had to take a larger, a very compassionate look at it and say the wrong had been done. There had to be healing. The people who had been wronged had to, there has to be some kind of a, some steps that had to be taken by the person who had harmed. But just by putting the person in jail, or by throwing a person out on the streets, that's not going to make any difference. So yes, because there's a lot of conversation around restorative justice, and maybe JLF should do another uh, session just on restorative justice and youth offenders. The next question, I'll come to you. Ria asks, what are the coping mechanisms for dealing with anxiety and stress linked to pandemic and even COVID fatigue in general?
So I don't think the stress and anxiety is just linked to the pandemic. As I said, the stress and anxiety is actually related to the impact of the pandemic, whether it's fear of the illness or fear of the uncertainty, or if there's been some loss. As I said, there are 5 stages of grief that we will need to go through, and we need to allow ourselves to go through that pain, because if we block that pain, it will morph and get in come surface in some other way, like some defensive behavior. So first is to give yourself permission to grieve whatever it may be. Second is, I think, to cope in uncertainty is to make goals which are not long-term goals, short goals, and short-term goals, that is so that you can achieve it. And then the other thing is to actually, what I call, recalibrate life. When I say recalibrate life, is to, we would have all have a set up, a kind of a map, what we want to do, dreams, aspirations. We'd have had milestones. This pandemic has impacted all of us, so to recalibrate, you need to revisit that, and you may need to actually make some edits or some alteration. And this is so that you have some sense of feeling of control, at least for the next 3 to 4 months. And I don't think we should make long-term plans accounting that the next 18 months are going to be uncertainty. We don't know which way it's going, what's really happening, and that's the way we learn how to cope. So do not discount aspects, account for it.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I think we'll wrap up our discussion now. There's been such a rich discussion and lovely listening to you. There's so much of wisdom in what you shared today. I'd like to end with, you can make out that I love metaphors and I talk too much in metaphors. That there was an old legend, I don't know how true it was, but that in olden times, that canaries were sent down to the mines to check for gas leaks, and if the canary would die, that would mean there would be a gas leak. Sometimes I feel our children and youth in our society, and especially youth who come from very, very difficult circumstances, from marginalized communities, they are the canaries of our times. That our society is toxic, and when they react then we blame them for it. What they're doing is basically trying to survive, trying that this is their struggle for survival. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I'm going to request Shonjoy to come in and say a few words.
Thank you so much, Anna Chandy. Thank you, Dr. Shelja Sen. I see you, I hear you, and listen, and really having people's back in these very difficult times, especially for children. And as we know, when the lockdown happened and the announcement or the pronouncement was made about Lakshman Rekha not stepping out of your home, I think all of us were like, but what about those people who don't have homes? Where do they go? And we're still dealing with the impact of that, not really being able to fathom how those people are being able to get back to the sense of normalcy as you're seeing, etc. Very, very difficult. But this talk, I think, just goes back to how important issues are like these. And thank you so much for such a considered deep dive. And when you have two professionals speaking, it's like each will give each other time. Unlike people like us, we're always just about to erupt and we have to have our say without necessarily listening to the other. It was wonderful to see the way that both of you measured time, and it was really measured time, considered each other's statement, and gave us such a rich evening. Truly magnificent. Thank you both. These are important conversations. And as we have been doing at JLF's Brave New World, we will continue to really focus on some of these key issues of our time, irrespective of whether it's the pandemic or not, because this is a defining moment, as both of you said, for our kids, because they shape the future. So thank you again very much for being on the show. Thank you to all our wonderful listeners, and thank you all for your questions, and thank you to Red FM Bajate Roho, our radio partners. I do hope you all will join us for our uh, our session over the weekend. This is on the 10th of July, and the first session is Bhay or Bhairav, Negotiating Fear, Devdutt Patnaik in conversation with Meru Gokhale. Fear of the unknown, as we've just heard, is the most debilitating of emotions. Mythologist and mesmeric storyteller Devdutt Patnaik speaks to editor and publisher Meru Gokhale of the inevitable nature of change and the archetypes of fear that have to be overcome to deal with the realities of life as they are dealt out to us. And this will be at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 2:30 p.m. British Summer Time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And the second session on Friday, the 10th of July, will be Are We All in This Together? Jairam Ramesh and Marcus Mensch in conversation. At a time when the human species confronts a pandemic, the planet faces the challenge posed by a warming Earth. How do we address the disproportionate impact of climate change on the poor and societies that have benefited least from the carbon economy? Economist, politician, and environmentalist Jairam Ramesh and climate, water, and environmental expert Marcus Mensch discuss governmental and institutional responses and ask even how we can survive and thrive together. This will be at 8:30 p.m. IST, 4 p.m. British Summer Time, and 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Stay safe. See you back on Friday.